Welcome to another episode of the Everyday Game Changers podcast. I'm your host, Barion McQueen, and you know how we do each and every week, talking to game changers in business and music and community and more. And today's guest, she covers not just the business, but big on the give back. I got Lacy Nicole in the building. How are you?
I'm doing well. I like that intro.
You like that?
Appreciate it.
So for the person who's just new to just hearing your name, give me just like a little brief
Okay.
synopsis of
Call it
who's Lacy.
my tender dating spiel.
Let me get that.
But now I guess tender is lame. I don't know. I'm old.
Let me
So
get that brief intro.
my name is Lacy Nicole. I work in trauma advocacy, primarily in PTSD, CPTSD. Um, I've also done an array of work in healing autoimmune disease, reproductive disease, helping people with issues that maybe stem from trauma and parlay into disease. And I've found immense success in this. So I'm really blessed for, the platform that I've kind of driven off, helping others. And this all stemmed from my experiences in my life. I had an array of trauma I had to go through as a young child, as a young girl. As a young woman, I was a victim of a very horrific crime. And as a result, I myself was diagnosed with an array of disease. I had 7 autoimmune diseases. I had a reproductive disease where I was told I would never carry a child. I was hospitalized for months, and I think I had like 14 surgeries over like a year. And it took a lot of hard work and gumption to step out of that and to try and step into something else. And I think for me personally, using my pain as a purpose to help others, not to be so cliche,
Yeah,
but was kind of the driving force behind my, brand and what I do. And it's called Shame to Sparkle. That's my foundation. And I'm really honored to be here. So thank you for having me.
of course. Now let me ask you, what's the shift in your mindset that you be like, you know what, I'm not gonna kind of let this thing hold me down, but I need to really take the power back that maybe it made me feel a type way, and then being super vulnerable that you have to pretty much put yourself out there to kind of advocate for other people who maybe can't speak.
Yeah, I like that question. So I think it's 3 things. I think when anyone makes a big change in life, right, there are 3 things, there are probably more, right? But for me, it was 3 things. And it's identity, fear, and a word everyone hates. And I get a lot of hate mail for it. So I don't mean it at all with any judgment to anyone listening. And I already love your audience because you're lovely. I can tell. But the word accountability.
Mm.
And they all coincide, right? So it's hard to change any type of mindset. It's very hard to change our brain and our day to day, and that's really what creates our identity. And so if our identity is deep rooted in being a victim or unwell or poor, say your identity is deep rooted in being financially unwell because your
Mm.
whole life you watched your parents struggle to pay the bills and you couldn't get gifts and you couldn't afford this. It's really painful. And
Mm.
that becomes a part of you, and it might become this limiting belief. And, if it becomes part of your identity, it's really hard to be accountable in something that you identify with. You're almost going head to head with yourself.
Yeah.
And then the fear coincides with, well, what if I don't succeed? And all these people that identify with this version of me that I identify with are judging me, or,
Of course.
what if I don't succeed and the world falls apart, whatever reason.
Yeah.
So for me, the first thing was my identity was deep rooted in being unwell, and I couldn't get out of bed, and I was in doctor's offices every week, and I couldn't walk, and they cut me open, and they took out my ovary, and they took out my this, and I remember when people would say, "Why don't you go see this natural healer and do this, or why don't you go do yoga?" And I was like, "The F you're gonna tell me to do yoga? Like, I don't sleep at night. I throw
Right.
up blood. You're going to tell me to do yoga?" And
Yeah.
I was angry because my identity was being unwell, and I had to get more angry than the fear and the identity and more accountable
Mm.
with what I was doing. And I know the word accountable is triggering again. So I'll say responsible, how can
Yeah.
I respond to this? And what role am I playing? What role am I playing in my lifestyle? What role am I playing? Am I really taking an hour a day, that extra hour I have? If you work 3 jobs and someone tells you to go do something and you're like, F you, I don't have time. But I did have the time. I had that hour a day to divulge into something new and change. And I
Mm.
had to just get so sick of my own pain to step out of those 3 things. And I think that's, it's a hard pendulum to swing the other way. And so there's no judgment or shade if you're someone who's totally, in it right now. Cause I've been there. I feel a lot of empathy. If you're unwell, it sucks.
Yeah. I just to give you some perspective, so like my dad committed suicide,
I'm so
and the my sister, I wouldn't say I'm like an advocate for suicide survivors, but I'm in a space where I can comfortably talk about it, and my sister is not, right? So she always tells me, I don't even know how you can even speak, and because she just tells people, he's no longer with us and it was an accident, and she leaves it at that. What I was trying to explain to her, I have to speak like this for the people who can't speak because for me, I was angry for a really long time because I'm like, oh, he committed suicide. That's so selfish. You had a wife, you had kids, why would you leave us and stuff like that? So I was really angry for a really long time. And then as I got older, it was just like um I learned the empathy part, right? Like I don't know what he was going through. I maybe it's just I could see how life could get to a point that somebody just wake up and be like, you know what? I'm done. I can't. It's too much, right? So,
That's like as harrowing as it is. And I'm so sorry that happened. If you don't mind me asking, how old are you?
oh, I was older. This was 2009, so it's already been that long. But I probably was in my mid 20s.
No, it's terrible.
Yeah,
It's absolutely terrible. But to get to that side of judgment and, if someone is struggling in that capacity and to be able to look at it like that is a beautiful thing. And it's a freeing thing for you because there's
yeah,
so many things in our life where we live in that past of, well, what if we did this?
yeah.
Why did we, and that's mental duress, right?
Yes. I mean, for a really long time. So I had this voicemail that I had on my cell phone because me and him was supposed to go to dinner 3 days after he did what he did. And I like missed his phone call. And it just was like, so for a really long time, I just had this guilt of like, man, well, maybe if I'd have not missed his call, something I would have did would have maybe changed his
Yeah.
mind, or you know what I mean? So I lived with that for a really long time, maybe like 7 years of just dealing with that. Um, so when I see your story, I'm just like, I relate personally because there's a lot of stuff I kind of went through.
Of course. And I'm sorry you went through that. And I think in some capacity we all do. You know, I always say the word trauma is such a this BuzzFeed word.
Yeah,
And, everyone uses the word trauma or narcissist. You see someone break up with someone, they're instantly a narcissist. And you're like, well, no, it's diagnosed.
yeah,
Just, not everyone is a narcissist, but I do believe that everyone has trauma and everyone has had to deal with, if trauma is classified like by definition of just something that's extraordinarily painful or a prolonged feeling of being unwell. So a
yeah,
divorce is a trauma,
yeah,
being pregnant for some women is a trauma. And worrying about your parents' finances, right? That's a huge trauma on a child's developing brain. Did you know how many kids have to worry about their parents' finances? I mean, I did, and my parents had financial stability. They were just high on drugs, but they didn't pay the bills because they were high,
right,
Like, could
yeah,
someone take the money and pay the lighting bill? But in any sense, worrying about things should causes our brain to change. And that's where the trauma therein lies. So, you going through that for 7 years, there's no doubt that your brain changed and your amygdala changes and your hippocampus shrinks, which is the part of your brain that deals with memory and problem solving. And your
mhm,
amygdala will grow, which is your fight or flight and your reaction. So maybe you're more triggered in your relationships, or maybe you're not the best partner, spouse. I obviously don't know your personal life, but
yeah.
that's a normal
Nah, that's
that's
good information though.
action.
Yeah,
And so I think if we all collectively even knew these tidbits about ourselves, which we're not taught, you don't go to the doctor and they're like, oh, you've been sad for 7 years holding this guilt.
yeah,
your brain has changed and here's what's going on. They just kind of tell you, you know, you have anxiety, you have a stomach ache, go see a GI. So that's really what I love to hear from, no, I don't love to obviously hear this story. It's horrific and I'm so sorry you went through that. But I love when people are so safe with themselves to share this story. And of course, I'm not
100%.
urging people that aren't ready to share theirs, but it's a really beautiful thing, especially to be like this big, strong man and to share, you know, that hurt you for so long.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing, like, I think a lot of like I'm really big on my personal brand, so I try to be as authentic as possible. Only because like some of the DMs I just get from people is just like, yo, Baron, you know, I really appreciate you just be so honest with everything. Like, yeah, you live in Miami where everybody drives a Lambo and a penthouse, but you, even though you can have all of that stuff, you just be so normal. And I'm like, I am really just normal. Like, I get
No, I
on,
think that's the beautiful thing though. Like I get those DMs and all the hate ones, I don't even care because it's
yeah,
such a beautiful thing to touch that one person.
yeah. Like my wife has lupus, so that was
Okay.
like a whole thing that I just had to learn.
I was, well,
Uh,
hook her up with me because I had systemic lupus for 6 years.
okay,
Now
wow.
my labs, I keep them all right here in this folder.
Hmm.
No lupus.
Wow. Yeah. So she's like, yeah, some kind of G2 mutation. So she's like prone to blood clots and stuff like
Yeah,
that. She's on Eliquis and she's on Xarelto, and then
I was on
looking at
these.
I'm looking at the cost of these, and I'm
It's
just like,
expensive.
who can afford pills $500 a month if you
No,
don't have insurance?
well, you know, in my opinion, at least, I think this medical system is such a scam. But she should talk to me because, you know, especially when you're a woman and you're unwell or you're a mom, it's, I don't even know a majority have the mental capacity to say, oh, I can fix this. Like, but you
Right.
can. It's freaking hard work. Like, it was hard work to fix this. And I had these crazy, like, rashes on I had all these weird things.
Wow.
But you know, I believe in that. I believe we weren't meant to be unwell, and it's our society and these drugs they're peddling us that are so beyond overpriced. But I'm sorry she's going through that, and I'm sorry. What a blessing though that she has such a supportive spouse.
Oh, that's my right hand. So let me ask you, how do you because you almost got to kind of counsel people to kind of even be able to share what's one of the toughest things you see with people with even getting to the point that you're at where they able to share and kind of be an advocate for it for the whole mental health.
I think that's a loaded question. I think there's two things. I think it's nervous system regulation and um, really, really validating yourself because when we share our stories people aren't always going to validate us, and it sucks. And if your nervous system is dysregulated and someone invalidates your pain, it's a really harrowing thing as a man or a woman. You
Right.
know, if your nervous system is corrupt, which most adults are, it's something, it's in the 90 percentages. I don't know the number, but everyone's nervous system, because we all came from all these parents with dysregulated nervous systems.
Facts. That's a
So
fact.
it's nobody's fault, but it's the truth. And someone devalues your truth, that's going to give you fear to tell it again, or anger or resentment. And I think when you can self-regulate and validate yourself in a sense, like now with my childhood, for example, I never told a soul about my childhood. I was so embarrassed. And I grew up with a lot of privilege and we had a nice home and cars and, you know, food on the table, which of course is a blessing. But I remember complaining sometimes about my parents going missing for days and the police being there every night and drugs, and I wasn't allowed to go to the dentist. Like basic necessity that I deserved as a young child were robbed of me.
Right.
And if I complained, I was immediately discredited. I remember complaining to a teacher, and she was like, "You're so lucky, you're privileged." And I remember complaining to a grandparent, and they were like, "You're lucky you have food on the table." And I learned to silence that, and it did cause that resentment and that anger. And what I did is I devalued myself, and I
Right.
said, "You're crazy." I gasped at myself. And when I really started learning about healing our nervous system and healing, you know, that little voice inside us, our inner child, so to speak, which is such a hokey word, especially telling a huge, like strong man. I keep saying a huge strong man because whenever I talk to like big men, you know, you
Yeah.
picture them like these strong big men. But I really learned it's okay to validate yourself and to claim your experiences. And like, I can look in the mirror and I look at my daughter. She's just, you know, little baby. But I always say, like, I didn't deserve that. She doesn't deserve, I would never give her that treatment. And I'm not angry at anyone, but I can tell my story. And if someone wants to DM me and say, you know, you have it, you're so privileged and you have this and it must be easy for you, that's okay, because I know that it doesn't matter. Like, what I experienced isn't right and it's not fair and it was trauma and it was painful. And, I deserved better. And I can give myself that through sharing my truth now. And maybe that's not the way for everyone. Everyone doesn't have to come in and share their truth. But I think if you validate yourself, nobody else's voice has as much noise.
What was your like? I almost want to ask before you got into this mental health space. What was you doing prior?
I was working in fashion.
Really, I seen your style on your Instagram, so that's why I
I was
asked.
working in fashion and PR in LA
Wow.
and
So
clubbing.
so the shame the sparkle makes sense then for you.
I love this. Well, and sparkle to me isn't, a fancy sparkle dress. Sparkle to me is just owning your shit. I don't know if I'm allowed to say shit, but
Nah,
owning
you
your shit
good.
in the highest
Yeah.
regard. And, if you want to be a freaking baller entrepreneur on Instagram and you want to post 20 Rolex a day and drive that Rolls and you want to be that and you live in Alabama and your parents hate you and your whole community hates you, you can sparkle. And I know that's a superficial example, but I'm saying it's anything. If you want to chase that dream, you were born to shine. And anyone's false belief that told you you're not enough, or any fear you developed, or any lie you tell yourself that I'm not healthy enough, or I'm not thin enough, or I'm not rich enough, or I'm not this, is a lie. Or if it's the sexuality or the color of my skin or this person's, it can all exist, but you can still sparkle and override it. And I think that we are so like pushed down that people forget that. And so I know the word sparkle is superficial, but I love it because, I do believe I was born to sparkle. And if I had parents that maybe gave me a little, time, I would have sparkled up there.
What do like I'm 38, right?
Okay.
So I feel I'm probably sounding like an old guy, but the newer generation gives me this
I'm in my 30s,
oh okay, so good.
my generation. I'm like, guy, I was printing out directions to parties on MapQuest in the holiday. Like, what are you talking about?
that's a fact for real,
I
MapQuest.
don't even know what no cap means. I just had to learn the
So
anyways.
this is my thing. So and I'm just doing this from perspective. Like I got like younger cousins that's they teens, and I feel like when they don't want to do something, they just scream mental health. Like, oh, I got anxiety or I got depression, but it's like it's
That's the
almost
sad.
yeah, right? Like it's like this, it's like the excuse now. So it's
No,
like hard. How do you know when it's
it does that, and that totally is a valid sentiment, and it totally triggers me when I see, especially, especially when I meet young people. Because when I was a young person, let me tell you something, I had no anxiety. Not to say it doesn't exist for some young people, but when I was a young person, I was a baller. I was like in that, you could call me at 4 a.m. and I would be there at 4:15, not a care in the world. But I think there's a lot of things that aid in this. And so I won't even ramble and bore your audience. But first and foremost, the dopamine we give young kids is, the statistics surrounding it are harrowing. And this is another thing I've talked about where I get so much pushback. So I'm not, again, it's not a privilege thing because I don't ever want to blur the lines of my mindset with privilege. But
right?
young kids now are given tablets 6 months old. Young kids are given TVs, young kids are given shows, young kids are given phones, young kids are given games, young kids are given social media and Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and Reels and Snapchat. And all of these things are proven to distort our brain and our reality. And it's true even for adults. I meet women that are like, I didn't get enough likes today, and this girl didn't like my picture, and this, it's their whole identity. And that's again where you have to take this charge of your identity. You can't tell a 16-year-old to take the charge of their identity. They're 16.
Yeah.
But we didn't have those barriers. So I feel empathy for that. But I also think we have a society of completely corrupt, and not all, I hate generalizations, there are some lovely. We have a society of a lot of corrupt doctors that make an immense, abhorrent amount of money
Mm.
off prescribing children specifically. The children alone, I believe, is like $7 trillion every year and a half or something. It's like 4 trillion a year.
Wow.
Children's benzos, SSRIs. I would have to look it up. So I never want to give, like a false number. And I don't have it memorized, surprisingly. I'm hanging by a thread today because my kid doesn't sleep. But I think that is something that aids to it, because if I was one of them, right? When I had my accident, I was on 22 medications and they just kept peddling them. And no one saw if they coincided or if they had. And I remember when I had my accident, they prescribed me Xanax. They prescribed me 4 Xanax a day. And I was a 120 pound, 25, 20, I was a young girl.
Yep.
And I started taking them because I was like, the doctor gave them to me. And I was a walking zombie. And that is what
Wow.
aided us in my identity. And I think when you're young,
Yeah.
you don't have an identity. When you're young, your brain isn't fully developed. You're changing, you're going with the flow. This friend likes dinosaurs, so I like dinosaurs. So if you go to a doctor, this licensed PhD, and you're 16 and you're scrolling Instagram on your blue light all night, feeling not enough, and your parents
Yeah.
are fighting, and they take you to some child psychiatrist, and they go, you have generalized anxiety disorder. Guess what you get to go do Monday? You get to go and say, I have generalized. That gives you almost, which we are in a society right now that's baited off being unwell and being a little unique and
Mm.
having, you don't want too much privilege. That's why I keep bringing up the word. It's a bad thing.
Yeah.
It's a bad thing to not have some type of pain in a lot of areas. So I think it does give kids this edge, and it's sad. I think that the words that are such BuzzFeed words are sad. And it's not to say, listen, a lot of kids do have anxiety and it's very real. And I'm grateful that we can diagnose and help. But majority of the people I work have PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress disorder, which is, different than generalized anxiety disorder. But essentially it's, like if you're a veteran in war and a bomb drops
Yeah.
on your bed and you don't sleep at night, that's PTSD. And now I mostly think about the brain. And so I dig into what's really affecting our brain. Are these medications helping our brain? But I don't know. I don't have all the answers as far as our youth and these blanket statements and how things change. I just know, and I do know, like in the early 90s, there was a percentage of young girls, bulimia was super, super, super huge, and anorexia
Right.
and all these things. And then it changed into cutting, like there's always these stats on what changes and what
Yeah.
flows. There's never a change in people being unwell.
Mm.
But it does bother me when these BuzzFeed words are turned into BuzzFeed words when they are real ailments.
Yeah. I don't go on Facebook much because of this.
Good.
Because when I open up my Facebook, people almost it's like whoever's the sickest is the best. So it's just like people documenting every minute of their life. I woke up this morning and my elbow itched, but the doctor says I'm depressed, and so I wasn't able to get out of bed, and they just this long feed of just negative energy that
That's your for not doing enough. We are
yeah,
excusing people
yeah,
as a society.
yeah.
How
I
easy is it for me not to be making as much cash as you and being like, well, he doesn't have a hurt elbow. He doesn't know what it's like.
yeah,
And how easy would it for you to be and I think that's also just something that's it's a self-reflective journey for each person. And it's
yeah.
how bad do you want? And for some people, they like it there, and that's okay too. There's no judgment. If your mind and your being is related about being unwell, and that's gotten you maybe a sense of security, I understand that too, and there's no judgment.
Those are just the phone calls out because it's like I can't. It just brings me down. Like it's just certain people. As soon as they call my phone, it's just it's maybe must be their goal to see if I can just bring him down as I feel, if that makes sense, right? Soon as they
Energy,
call me,
that's what I call it.
exactly.
You can
It's
use
like,
it.
yeah, it's like, hey, Bear, how you doing? I'm like, yo, I'm doing well, man. Just out here working. Oh
They're like,
man,
oh, my
yeah,
day is so bad.
exactly. They like, oh, not me, man. I barely could make it out the bed this morning. I'm just like, bro, I gotta let you go. because you can ruin my day at 8:30 a.m. Like
But
I'm
that's,
good.
that's a sentiment to you, and that's what boundaries are all about, right? It's one of those pillars of being a self-sufficient, someone who thrives in society or hustles in society. It's, you have to know when to turn off the light, and if you're juggling all these things, are you going to really take on someone else's? And it's okay to say no, and you don't have to feel resentment. And a lot of people that are resentment based mindset are the people that say yes and then they're angry about it. So that's where the
Hmm.
word accountability, like I used to say yes to everyone and I was so angry. I had to be accountable. Well, I'm the idiot saying yes to
Keep
everyone.
saying yeah, yeah.
Why has my phone been on for 3 hours? Gotta go. I have to pee. Like, why am I sitting here?
Exactly. So where do you see your foundation in the next? I hate to say 5 years, but give me like a 2 year game plan. 5 years is
Um,
just cliche. Give me 2 years.
2 years. I like it. So we just launched. So it's called Shame to Sparkle. We have a .org and a .com. But info on the foundation is on the .org. And we've partnered with some great physicians and neuroscientists. And we've partnered with my doctor who does ketamine, which is just extraordinarily helpful for trauma, depression, and addiction primarily. So I wish that every single adult I meet on this planet could do 6 sessions of ketamine, I
Mm,
guess in America, not on the planet, because there are a lot of healthy places. So we partner with them. And my goal is it was primarily to help PTSD in that space, women specifically have been victims of crime and, abuse, sexual abuse. And so I'm just hoping that we parlay from there. I don't really have, it's so funny because I write goals like every morning when I do this stretching video. And I don't know if I have any goals per se. I just want to help as many people as possible. And I
mm,
don't necessarily have that arrow to the line because if I met someone and it changed the trajectory, I would be okay with that even because the
mm.
whole thing started as like a one-off. I just shared my story on Instagram and it went viral and I wasn't expecting. I'm not an influencer. I'm not a big to do.
Yeah.
So that's what happened.
Nice. So like my audience is it's a unique audience. So I'm big on entrepreneurship because I don't work for anybody, but there's a lot of people who follow my platforms that, maybe they got a little side hustle or they got like something that they working on, whether it's a nonprofit or something around mental health or
Totally.
just anything on the side. What's one piece of advice you could leave for that one person that maybe they got this idea and they don't know where to start, right? They don't know how they can find this passion, how you found it.
I have great advice for that because as much as this sounds another thing that sounds narcissistic. I'm sorry, I keep saying the most narcissistic things to you, but I pride myself in having succeeded in everything I've ever tried. Even when I fail, I succeed
Mm,
because that success gave me a lesson. And I always say 3 lefts make a right. So like you might screw
mm,
up 3 times, you're still getting there, and 3 more, and you're still getting there. And the biggest thing for people, myself included in the past, is you have to start. You can start anything and you can have zero intelligence on it. There's always going to be someone more intelligent or more well educated or better looking or more financially stable, or they have the fancy thing and you don't. You just have to start because
mm,
starting gets you going. And if you're talking about something and you have this idea and you don't start and you see people around you start, that resentment you feel isn't healthy. It's the fire inside you, and you
mm,
deserve to start and you deserve to try. And like even my podcast, I suck at the internet. I suck at podcasting. I suck at setting it all up. I'm like tech. We joke I'm tech unstable. I don't even know how to use Spotify, you guys. Like my assistant hates me, but I just started. I was like,
yeah.
let's just start. And I watched like 3 of my friends start a podcast. And even then in my mindset, I was like, well, everyone has a podcast, but you know what? That's okay. It's
Yeah.
okay. Every person writes a book. You still tell your story because you might impact 10 people. And of that 10, that one might change your life. You just have to take that leap of faith. And that's where all of these things, the 3 things, again, that we started out with, we're kind of going full circle, get in the way. You can't have that fear. You have to have that accountability. Like I can start. And it's okay if you start and fail, because the next time you start, you're starting from experience.
Mm,
And the next time you start, you're starting from experience and maybe three friends that you met along the way, maybe an enemy along the way. And guess what? The best revenge is success. So,
okay. I appreciate it, Lacy. I want to thank you for your time.
thank
Definitely let
you.
people know how they can get in touch with you and your foundation.
Yeah, Lacy is my Lacy Nicole. Lacy OC is my Instagram, and Shame to Sparkle, shametosparkle.org.com. And yeah, I can't wait to follow along everything you're doing. Thank you for having me. And please, if you ever have the time, send your wife my way. I would love to talk to her and
Yes.
hear about her story. And I mean that immensely.
Sure.
I'd love to hear about women's stories with health. I'm really inspired to try and do my best to give them any resources I have. I'm sure she has the best resources in the world through you, but
Oh,
just
I,
additionally,
yeah, I need help too. So we
in
definitely
addition,
be in touch.
I'm so excited. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.